Okay, well, hello everyone. Thank you for coming. And I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to first of all go through some of my other work, mainly in film and TV, and then I'll get to the costumes, the flower fairies. So, next slide, please. Next slide, please.
It should have moved.
Oh, it hasn't for me. No, it hasn't moved.
Okay.
There you go.
Oh, sorry, I moved back, so it probably needs to go back.
This is where I started. Well, it wasn't actually where I started, but it was early, in a absolutely chaotic workroom in London, and I wasn't designing then. I was working for costume designers, making mostly accessories, masks, animal costumes, anything that had to be sort of built. And I think this picture is so funny because it just is such a mess. All the paperwork behind me, that was my accounts. So, but what was really interesting was that everything that came out of that workroom was absolutely pristine. You wouldn't believe it to look at it, but it was. Next slide, please. These were some of the animal masks I made early on. They were for Nutcracker. At the time, I was known for making all the Nutcracker mice. Every single production of Nutcracker always has mice or rats and king rat, and that was what I did. Next slide, please. And this is a picture of them in the making. There were a lot of them. It was rather like the plague had broken out in my workroom at the time. Starting with clay, and then they were molded, and then they were made in very lightweight for dancers. Next slide, please. And this was something else when I started working in film for an incredible costume designer called James Acheson. And me and my team made these extraordinary masks. They were whirling dervishes for Time Bandits, a film called Time Bandits. Next slide, please. And this was another job for Jim, for Monty Python's The Meaning of Life, making a tiger costume in the jungle, which was actually Elstree Studios. So I always do very unusual things, which made it interesting. Next slide, please. I did a lot of work for Jim Henson of the Muppets, who came to London from New York, where they started to make feature films in the UK. Next slide, please. These were two of the films that I worked on. Big films, nice budgets, and all puppets. I mean, there were humans, a few humans. I think only in Labyrinth, David Bowie and Jennifer Connelly. But otherwise, it was puppet making. And this was a new era in London when animatronics were introduced to the UK. But that's a whole other subject. So, well, let's go on to the next slide. This was a remake of the Dark Crystal, a TV series in 2019 by Netflix. So it was a lot more sophisticated. It was a very different production to the original one. Next slide, please. I also, after I'd been working for Henson's and I'd learned all about animatronics and sculpting and hair work and the sort of more sophisticated costume, animal costume. I was asked by the BBC to design and make Aslan the lion. So I was able to get a fantastic team together. This is the work of quite a big team of different designers, animatronics people, I sculpted it with my assistant Ali Einan, and Nikki Lyons masterminded the whole skeleton based on a real skeleton. It was 2 people in the costume. So yes, a big, a lot of work. Next slide, please. I was also then asked, after I'd done Aslan, to do the first bat suit by Bob Ringwood, who I'd been working with on a film in Spain. He asked me to do it, and I actually turned it down because A, I wasn't a Batman fan, and B, I thought a man should make it because it's such a macho figure. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I ended up doing it again with my team. Next slide, please. And this just shows the costume in the making, which was clay over a life cast of Michael Keaton, who played Batman. Next slide, please. I then started I was asked to do TV commercials, which, whenever that was, I think it was the 80s, must have been the 80s, was a big thing. You know, they were big productions. They were looked upon as small films. They still are, but it's a different era now. Next slide, please. These are just some of the things that I was asked to design, and they were all different. There was always a lot of flying. This is Dawn French flying as the Sugar Plum Fairy. So it was all very a bit wacky, but fun. Next slide, please. These princesses for Lloyd's Bank, then they were made. Now you wouldn't make them, you'd hire them, because time is so much shorter now and budgets are so much tighter. But for this commercial, they were made, which is always lovely to be able to make things. Next slide, please. And this was another completely new to me. This is the first job I ever did, which was underwater. I mean, totally different. I'd never done anything like that before. I knew nothing about how things reacted in the water, and so I had to learn pretty quickly. We shot this in the Caribbean. It was very luxurious, and I've always loved doing underwater work ever since then. Next slide, please. Next slide. This was a campaign. Sometimes they go on for a long time. You know, when you think of the meerkats, they're, I think, mostly digital, but some campaigns become popular and then they appear again and again, which is always nice to have something like that. And this was Barbara Windsor, who was playing the Queen of Bingo. So that was good fun as well. Next slide, please. And then this was also, it was Arnold Schwarzenegger for a campaign for a computer game called Mobile Strike. The logistics, especially with stars, are very complicated. In this instance, he was in LA. It was an American commercial. I was in London, and it was shot in Prague. So the logistics, and he had about 4 or 5 different outfits, and he's not a standard size. So yeah, logistics come into all this a lot. Next slide, please. And this was another one, the late, great Carrie Fisher, who arrived. It was a one-day shoot. She arrived on the day. There was no fitting, no measurement. And so I had a room full of clothes for her to choose from. And we ended up a bit of a scramble before we started filming. And this was what she wore. She wore her own glasses as well, which were great. Next slide, please. And this one was the athlete Katarina Johnson-Thompson, who had to throw a javelin in an 18th century gown. We did it. I mean, you'd think you'd just trip up. So we had to rig it, and so that her legs were completely free and so that her arm could lift the javelin. Athletes are fantastic. They're like dancers. They're wonderful to work with. They've got incredible physical discipline. Next slide, please. This was a TV series with Matt Lucas as Toad and Bob Hoskins as Badger. My idea of great to do, because I'm not a period costume designer, but for a commercial or for something that has a sort of, it's fantasy or comedy, it's wonderful to do period, but it wasn't historically accurate at all. It was invented. Next slide, please. This was Matt as the washerwoman. He had to have a lot of what we call stunt doubles because there was horse riding. He ended up in the water. There were different people wearing it. And so I can't remember, but I think about 6 of them were made. Next slide, please. This was a contemporary film I did, which it had a sort of heightened reality. The cast was incredible. My favourite actor, Gary Oldman, and Robert Carlyle, both amazing. But these were costumes, but they were clothes. I mean, they were bought. Next slide, please. And then this was a high point of my career when I was asked to make this, what was nicknamed the living dress for Lady Gaga. It was, there's a whole other story to this, which I can't go into now, unfortunately, but that was an amazing experience. Next slide, please. And this is the costume in the making. We didn't have access to Lady Gaga. She was in LA, we were in London. The tour started in the UK. And this is Adam Wright, who designed the animatronics because the costume moved. So it was a big team, his team and my team, making this dress. Luckily, the runner, Gracie, she was exactly the same size as Gaga, so she was our house model. Next slide, please. And I love this picture. She's just run down that staircase. She's off the stage, back of the stage. She's wearing 6-inch heels and she's running around to the back of the stage where there's a quick change area. Both feet are off the ground. It looks like the costume weighs nothing, but I can tell you it did weigh something. We did everything to make it light, but it was big and there was weight to it, but it was well balanced on her. Next slide, please. And this was a fabulous, I thought it was fabulous, the Jonas Brothers Sucker video, a collaboration with their stylists. They were all from LA. I was in the UK, it was shot in the UK. And it was, everything was done in a week. It was prep, everything, and shoot 1 week. And it was amazing. It's fabulous, fabulous video visually. Next slide, please. So now we're sort of going into the realms of the flower fairies. I started a little sideline, I suppose you'd call it, called the Little Costume Shop, because I'd started my career at the Royal Opera House in the props department, not in costume, but in props. And then I moved on to doing other things. I wanted to, in some way, go back to my roots. I would have loved to have designed a ballet. I adore the ballet and the opera, but ballet is in my DNA. And so I made a little collection of quarter scale ballet costumes. Next slide, please. And this is them. They were exhibited at the Royal Opera House in the showcase at the front of house. It's gone now. It's not there anymore. They've completely remodeled the front of house at the Royal Opera House, but this was the collection of little costumes. And where Penguin, Thomas Merrington at Penguin, got the idea for making the flower fairies in quarter scale. We'd actually worked together before on a TV series for the BBC, so we knew each other. Next slide, please. These are some details. It shows the scale. It's small and fiddly, but actually it's quite meditative, especially sewing sequins on or hot fixing them on. I love sequins. And I came across Hand and Lock, who are the royal embroiderers. They moved premises and they sold their old stock. And I bought literally a carload of vintage sequins and little findings, little pearls and things like that. And I used them for this. Next slide, please. Next slide. There you go. So there were a few different ones. This was the Spring Fairy and Cinderella with little tiny wings at the back. Next slide, please. And Carmen. And I mean, all of that is done by hand. They take forever to do. Yeah, but I enjoyed doing them. Next slide, please. This was actually a replica made for the dancer Dame Beryl Gray, the late dancer Dame Beryl Gray. It was a replica of her 1952 Odile for Swan Lake, and all of that is stitched by hand. There's no way of speeding anything like this up. I mean, you could do it differently. You could print it and apply it, which if you were doing a lot of them for a film or something, that would probably make sense. But for a one-off, the whole point is that they're handmade. Next slide, please. This was Don Quixote. Again, it was the same sort of techniques, the same mannequin, all handmade, a lot of silk, a lot of dyeing. I dyed ombre the overskirts. Next slide, please. This was a one-off I made for the Amy Winehouse Foundation. I still am a huge fan of hers. And this was made mostly in leather. The wings were leather, and it was auctioned to raise money for her charity. And the tattooist that did Amy Winehouse tattoos tattooed the mannequins, which was incredible. Next slide, please. And this was Lise from La Fille Malgarde. This one was very, very difficult because of the scale. you know, you have to scale the fabrics down, and that very often means it's silk, because you can get the finest silks that are very thin but still strong, and they dye, and generally they behave. But I think I made quite a few versions of this before I did the final one. Next slide, please. And this was one that was, you know, the whole figure. It was an opera, Queen of the Night. So this was expanding it a little bit, and the people in there just show the scale. A lot of crystals on that because it was a starry sky. Next slide, please. So now we've got to the flower fairies. So this is the collection, 3 of which are in the gallery at the moment. I must acknowledge my team of all these talented artists, professional. They work in film, doing sculpting, mold making, casting, painting, pattern cutting, sewing, printing, and Ponjis, who supply the most fabulous silks, as well as the Flower Museum in Hastings, who helped me with small scale floral elements. Next slide, please. So this was an early mock-up. First of all, the mannequin had to be made. It's actually smaller than quarter scale, a little bit smaller than quarter scale. It couldn't be any smaller. At least I don't think I could do it any smaller. And they were paper wings at this stage, just printed, just to get the proportions, start getting the proportions worked out. Next slide, please. And there was a period of just trying things out, figuring out how each one was going to be made, what it was going to be made of. And with any costume, whether it's for a human or a little miniature like this, there's always a sort of R&D, research and development, looking into how best you're going to do it, or to mock things up, try things out before you use the dyed fabric or the whichever fabric you're going to use. So this shows it how rough it was to begin with. Next slide, please. This is a very good friend of mine, Debbie, who helped me. If Debbie hadn't helped me with Poppy, I think I might have thrown it out of the window. It was so difficult, that one. It was the most difficult of all of them. And Debbie is a professional costume maker, and I'm used to working in a team. I don't consider myself an artist. I consider myself a designer, and designers work in teams usually. But Debbie and my sister Lau, who is a professional costume maker for the ballet. And so I kept sending her pictures and saying, now what do I do? This one really, really was tricky. Next slide, please. And these are some pictures just showing some of the underneath. It was very important, you know, that some poppies are multi-petaled, but for a dress, of course, there are petticoats. And so it was very important to continue the edges, cockled, I'd call them cockled edges, a bit like lettuce, frilly lettuce edges across the hems of the petticoat. I could go into much more detail about how they were made, all cut on the cross, all dyed, and most of it hand stitched. Very little wasn't. Next slide, please. This is it slightly more advanced with the actual wings. I'll talk about the wings in a minute. And the back, of course, is just as important as the front. I think it worked out okay in the end, but so tricky. I was trying to replicate antique pleating, which, if any of you know Fonteyn in the 1920s, he had a secret formula to antique pleating fabric, but there are other ways of doing it. Next slide, please. This shows some of the strips of the silk, which was very, very, very fine habitite, I think it was, that were cut out, stitched, and then I used the towel rail in the bathroom to stretch them, to antique pleat them. And actually it was perfect because the towel rail also sort of baked them, dried them. And it also shows how the wings held on. I sunk magnets into the back of the silicone mannequin, and then one magnet goes over the top to keep them in place. That was the best way I could think of at the time to do that. Next slide, please. Next slide. Helen, are you there? Next slide. There you go. Sweet pea is the next one. Next slide, please. So this just shows, again, the beginning, starting to make patterns for the petals, which were made in a material called plastazote, which is a kind of foam, very thin foam, but it only comes in restricted colours. So I got silk chiffon, shot silk chiffon that has two colours running through it to overlay to give a bit better colour quality. Next slide, please. And this is her, all made of leather glove, very fine glove leather. I had to take a bit of a liberty with the fastening at the side, which isn't in the illustration, but I thought, well, actually you don't know it's not there in the illustration because you only see one side of it. So on the other side, I laced it up, which was the only way of getting it onto the mannequin. Next slide, please. And this shows a little bit more of the construction in the leather and the silk overlay. Again, there were quite a few attempts at getting the patterns right. Next slide, please. And the next one's lavender, which is gorgeous. And again, with lavender, the petals, I think, were leather. Yeah, I think, I'm just trying to remember. Oh, yeah, sorry. Sweet peas were leather as well. The patterns were plastizo. But her top, I had to plead with Debbie to help me with that, because wherever there's a concave shape, i.e. a waist, even if you cut it on the cross, it jumps over the concave bit. So it was, Debbie made this, and it was unbelievably fiddly. And it was wetted to help mold it to the form. And you can see a few little stitches, little hand stitches, which are just like tiny little gathering stitches that make it fit the waist. But yeah, that was a tricky one. But I love it. It looks fabulous in the end. Next slide, please. Next slide. Doesn't want to move. There we go. Oh, and I had a kitten at the time. He's a big cat now. And he was very interested in everything that was going on. And that's him checking out part of the petticoat before it got longer on Lavender. And also the picture on right, you can see one of the wings has its cover, its printed cover that was generated from beautifully painted artwork by Martha Fine, of course, following the illustrations as closely as possible, and then digitally printed. Funnily enough, not in silk, in a synthetic, which Hatley Print, who printed them, they recommended. They said, no, don't do it in silk. That kind of went against the grain for me, but it did work. Only just, though. Next slide, please. And then this is again in the making of that particular costume, and all the little elements, the little flowers, they were laser cut in leather, fine leather, and little stamens went into them. I think I had those. I think I already had those left over from something. Next slide, please. And then Willow. And next slide. This one, I love this one. And that was really, really tricky, thinking, oh, how on earth are these going to be made? So the well, leaves, I suppose they are, the fronds, they again are very fine leather, and they were cut out by, I think it was quite a long time ago now. It's about 2018. I think they were cut out by the Flower Museum, who had templates for cutting out, you know, different petals, different textures, different edges. And then I remember stretching them and sort of pulling them into, almost molding them into shape to get that flick at the end, and to try and do it so that it didn't become bulky. I had to whittle down the waists with actually probably most of them because of the bulk of the material over the top. And again, I remember her top was put on wet so that it molded, and that was a very, very fine silk satin, I think. Next slide, please. Closer pictures also showing the wings, which had to fold back. You know, they couldn't just be on one plane. They had to have that angle to them as an insect would. And these were obviously, you can probably see a dragonfly, based on a dragonfly. Next slide, please. And this is it in the making. Again, it had a little petticoat just to help kick out the hem. And then all of them actually had the green area. You can see that is a fine power net, which I made for all of them as an anchor to everything that went on top, to tension everything so that it couldn't lift out. Next slide, please. And lastly, the silver birch, which is actually my favourite one. Next slide, please. There's something about this one in particular I absolutely love. I mean, I love the drawing. I love all the drawings, but I particularly love this one. And so it was a little bit like making a pine cone or something. And these were leather. And then the skirt was very fine habitai silk, Jap silk, over a petticoat, which you'll see in a minute. And I dyed it, I ombre'd it so that it was darker at the hem, darker at the waist, and lighter in the middle, and then a bit oranger at the hem. And then the little petals or little pieces on the bodice were painted into. Next slide, please. And this shows some of the dyeing process. You can see inside the skirt another petticoat. I remember actually the edges of these, you can see the fabric rolled up. That was laser cut. It's such fine fabric that, you know, it would normally fray, but the laser cutting kind of seals it if it's something like this, which isn't worn. If it was worn, it would definitely fray, even if it was laser cut. And you can see all the pins holding on the little pieces of the bodice. Next slide, please. Now, the wings, which was the same technique for all of them, they were laser cut in metal, in stainless steel. But I also had to take the shine off the stainless steel, which made it look modern and almost like a bit of technical. And so I found this stuff. I can't remember where I found it now, but it was because you can't paint stainless steel for obvious reasons. But this material I got, which you can see in the middle picture at the top, I'd gone over it with this stuff, and it just, well, I suppose it corroded it, which was perfect. And then top right picture, you can see it now a long way from its shiny stainless steel to being something a lot more organic. And then the printed wings, again, you can't glue to stainless steel. And anyway, gluing is always risky for a lot of things. So I ended up sewing them on. And then I think I put little tiny dabs of glue, I think you can see it in the middle picture at the bottom, on the knots of the thread. They had to be tensioned. And then the edges were burnt so that I think I might have done it with a soldering iron or something, again, so that it wasn't going to fray. And because it was a synthetic, that was actually quite good. That worked quite well. Yeah, so that was basically the process of doing the wings. Next slide, please. So that's, I've forgotten what was coming up next. I'm just going to mention, because I think we've run out of time for this presentation, so we can have a Q&A. I've just, or in October, my book will be coming out. I've written it mainly for young people coming into the profession, but for anybody that's interested in what goes on behind the scenes of costume. And I'll be posting about it on social media quite soon, because it's not long before it's in print, and it will be an ebook as well. And it's full of pictures. So I hope it's quite an entertaining book. Next slide, please. So that's it. These are my contact details if you need them.